Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders of KW Bonsai. Today we're doing an update to my small leaf Schefflera Bonsai. We're going to check in what's happening with it, and we're going to do a little cleanup around the root base. In the last video I was explaining that the tree needed aerial roots growing down from the branches or trunks into the soil to give it that real tropical banyan look. So what we did was we left the top of the tree to grow, and it's grown quite a bit. I had to actually prune some branches off that were jutting out from the sort of rounded profile, some vigorous branches. I pruned those off just to keep it a little more compact. It's not very compact, but I don't want it taking up like the entire plant room here. So I'm trying to keep it to a reasonable size. Over the last month or so, the tree has started to grow aerial roots. And you can see one here, one forming here, 2, 3, 4. There's one here, 5. There's one back there, 6. There's another one forming, 7. So we're starting to get a lot of aerial roots dropping down from the trunks or branches into the soil, which is really going to add to our tropical banyan style look of the tree. So here's a close-up of the aerial roots. And you can see as they start up very thick like this, white, and then as they go into the ground, the upper part thins down to almost the thickness of a wire. You see this one's developing more aerial roots coming off the aerial root, which is really nice. It gives you that sort of braided look. You can see this one's hit the ground and it's starting to thicken up at the base here, which is good. They're a little crooked right now. Some people are very fussy with the aerial roots. They have to be absolutely straight down. They feel like gives it a scale look, that the root looks like it has lots of weight as it's hanging in the air, and it goes straight down into the ground. So, but they can be repositioned later on. They can also be wired. You can wrap, once they toughen up a bit, you can wrap wire around them to get them absolutely straight. When you repot it, you can change the position of the root where it goes into the ground and get them absolutely straight if you want to. Yeah, we'll see in the future how it looks. They're not too bad now. They're fairly straight, but yeah, we'll maybe change that later on when we repot it someday. So I'm really happy that we're getting aerial roots. It's kind of like my Christmas present, I guess. The other thing I want to do today is start to clean up the moss. I didn't do much cleanup work on it in fall. I was just letting the tree grow, and it's starting to get out of hand now. And I think if I let this moss grow any longer, it'll get to the point where it's hard to get it to look good again. So I want to trim the moss down. In the other video I mentioned I was going to repot this tree into more of a shallow layer of soil, and I'm starting to rethink that now. The tree didn't grow any aerial roots last summer, even though I was letting the top grow out, and I think that's because the roots were growing into the soil, and they've probably filled the container now. So it's probably almost pot bound, and that's one of the reasons we're starting to get aerial roots come down, is that the soil's just drying out too quick down below. The tree's looking for more moisture. The air's humid in the plant room here, so it's starting to drop aerial roots. So that's a good thing. So let's go in. We'll start to clean up the moss. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start to clean the moss off the trunks. If I can grab it. Oh, it just broke off. Yeah. And you'll see at the moment the tree kind of looks like a regular plant. And once we clean all this moss off and prune down this thick moss, get it to a nice thin layer, you'll see the tree sort of come alive. It'll look more like a miniature tree again, rather than a regular house plant. This moss growing on the trunks and that, it just spoils the illusion of an old tree. And again, I've mentioned before that, some people say, oh, I like the moss growing on the trunks. Makes it look like it's a rainforest tree. And I don't know, most rainforests don't have a lot of rain down at the soil level. They get rain, but it never really reaches the ground too much. It's used up in the upper part of the canopies. The soil is usually poor, so it never really holds water. So you probably wouldn't get a lot of moss growing on the trunks of trees in a rainforest. There are exceptions. I'm sure there's some areas that would get a lot of moss, but I personally don't like the look of moss growing on your trunk. As I've said, it does two things. It discolors your roots. It makes them, because the light never hits them and they're always moist, they can go a darker color than the rest of your trunk. That kind of spoils the look. And if you go to all the work of growing a nice root system, pruning your roots, and then it gets covered up in moss and no one ever sees it, it's kind of a lot of work for nothing. So if you've got nice roots, you want to be able to see them. You want them covered up with moss, and it'll add to the scale look of the tree. So I'll come back when I've got all this moss picked off the roots and the trunks, and then we'll prune down the moss around the tree. I'm working at getting the moss off the trunks and the root base, but I'm going to have to prune off some of this moss out front here. It's just kind of too thick and I can't really get in there to see what's going on too well. So we're going to give that a pruning first. And even if you prune it down to the point where it's not green anymore, it'll green up again. As long as you keep a thin layer of moss there, it'll rejuvenate itself and turn a nice lush green again when the conditions are right. The only reason I'm able to grow moss indoors is that it's quite humid in the plant room here, especially when the sun comes out. All the moisture from the pots goes up through the leaves and into the air. It creates a really nice humid environment on a sunny day. Okay, so I'm starting to see the roots a little better now. Allows me to go in and continue picking off moss off the roots. It's going to take a while. Probably take me at least a good hour, I think. So I'll continue on and we'll come back and see how it's going. I have taken about an hour on pruning the moss and it's not done yet. I think it's going to take another good half hour. And I'm starting to run out of light. I'm just kind of carefully pruning around these aerial roots here. So hopefully you get the idea, and that the pruning the moss down makes the tree look bigger, gives it a more miniature look to the moss. So that's it for today on our small leaf Schefflera clump style bonsai. We've got our aerial roots underway, which is really going to add to the tropical appearance of the tree. And we're starting to get our moss pruned down back to a nice tight layer. So we'll check in spring on this tree, see how it's doing. So Nigel Saunders of KW Bonsai. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.